Welcome back to The Narrative. I'm your storyteller, Calistro Fire. The territorial controversy between Venezuela and Guyana continues. Tensions are high. Troops are amassing on the various borders. Brazil is part of the conversation. The leaders of Venezuela and Guyana, Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela and Ofan Ali of Guyana, have agreed to sit down in St. Vincent on Thursday to discuss this matter. Ali has made it clear that there will be no discussion on any shifting of the borders, that they will wait on the ICJ's ruling. And Brazil is expected, will be there as an observer, the meeting being held, being chaired by St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Ralph Gonzalez. Now, this is a controversy that dates back as far as 1899. It's a centuries-old situation. The borders were settled by international arbitration in 1899. Venezuela, over the decades, has claimed sovereignty over the Essequibo region, which in 2015, Guyana discovered vast oil resources, natural resources there. There was a referendum just a few days ago in Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro asking his people to decide on a number of issues, including Venezuela's sovereignty over the Essequibo region, which is almost two-thirds, about two-thirds, 74% or so of Guyana's territory, as well as the acknowledge or not to acknowledge the ICJ as an authority to decide over this matter. Now, joining me on the program is Carl GREENIDGE. He's the advisor on borders for Guyana, and he's also Guyana's agent at the ICJ. I'll discuss with him ahead of the meeting what exactly the situation is now and how Guyana is expected to present at that meeting on Thursday in St. Vincent. Welcome to the program, GREENIDGE.
Good afternoon, my dear. Thank you very much for having me on your program, and hello to your other guests and your audience.
Thank you so much for joining us on The Narrative. It's a pleasure to have you on. So Thursday, Guyana and Venezuela sit down in St. Vincent. Will you be also at that meeting?
No, I shan't.
Okay.
I shan't.
What can we expect? I know I saw a statement from your president of Finale saying that the issue of Guyana's sovereignty over the entire region will not be part of the discussion of the meeting in terms of giving any ground at all, that you're waiting on the ICJ. What then is the purpose of this meeting? What can we expect Guyana's position to be there?
Well, I believe President Ali has indicated that he is happy to speak to President Maduro on any issue except issues touching on the matters before the court. That is fairly straightforward, and it is in fact Venezuela that is keen to speak, in the sense that they have been calling for direct talks and calling for it in a way that suggests that there have been no talks. But I just want to make it clear that as recently as 2016 to 2018, the two sides were engaged in extensive discussions over this matter of the controversy and how it might best be resolved. And it was the failure of those talks to yield anything fruitful. In fact, the talks had led to a widening of the two sides. And that led to Secretary General Gutierrez, who had looked at this matter in conjunction with Mr. Ban Ki-moon. That is what caused the Secretary General to refer the matter to the ICJ. And if it is a failure of dialogue to resolve the matter that led to it going to the court, then it is difficult to see that you can take the same issue and put it back in the hands of dialogue, of those that are responsible or claim to be carrying out dialogue. And that is the issue. What exactly they will discuss, I'm not able to say. But I suppose there are a number of issues that the two sides may find it of interest to pursue. And they will agree that presumably at the beginning of the meeting, they will agree on an agenda. That has not so far been agreed. And I don't really want to speculate on that.
Now, Brazil's presence, they will be there as observers. President Lula will be there. How key is Brazil's involvement in this, given that their borders can also be affected by any change in the Guyana-Venezuela border?
Well, first of all, can I just correct a couple of observations you made at the beginning? The controversy has not been in existence for over a century. This is a favorite observation made by all journalists who deal with this matter. It is completely untrue. The two sides had a dispute in the last decade of the 19th century and agreed under pressure from the United States, pressure that Venezuela prompted the United States to exert on Britain, to have an international panel undertake arbitration on the matter. And the arbitration was completed after having conformed to guidelines agreed in 1897. It was concluded in 1899, and there was no controversy or dispute until 1962. And until 62, Venezuela had been completely unwilling to have the border amended even by 2 inches. Okay, that is one. And in fact, the Essequibo region is not 2/3 of Guyana's land surface. It is over 2/3 of Guyana's land surface. It is almost 3/4 of the land surface of Guyana. So I just wanted to get want to get that out the way from the beginning.
Well, of course, even not one blade of grass, so we don't want to make that mistake.
Absolutely.
And I did say over 74%, so my math was totally
Yes, you
flawed when
did.
I said
You,
74% and 2/3. So
no,
yes,
that, yeah, that
my
aspect
12,
was absolutely correct. No
yeah,
problem.
my 12-year-old will not be happy that I continue to not be good at math.
No.
But how key is Brazil's position in all of this conversation? And how much of a strength and a support are they to Guyana, given where they are located?
Yes, thank you. Brazil is key in this exercise in the sense that it is um, it is one of our neighbors, and at in every sense a neighbor of considerable capacity. That is really what I want to say. Brazil has considerable military muscle. It has uh, a good reputation on the international relations front. So it has one of the most formidable foreign affairs ministries in the entire developing world. And in that sense, it is useful um, to have such a neighbor pay attention to what is going on. I should also say that the borders of Guyana and Brazil and Venezuela meet at a tri-junction point. And that tri-junction point was agreed. They worked on it in 1905. It is the subject of an agreement signed in 1928, and there are boundary markers put down. So Brazil's borders meet Guyana's borders, meet Venezuela's borders at some point. And some of the claims, if Venezuela were to really look at what they're saying seriously, they would realize that this is not merely a matter for Guyana. Those boundaries were determined, settled, and signed at different times, but all involving Brazil and Guyana, as well as Venezuela. So, if, for example, areas in the south and in the extreme south are sought, then you will be seeking to acquire territory that had already been negotiated and settled between Guyana and Brazil.
Now, while armed conflict seems a bit far away in all of this, the Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro he continues to fail to recognize the ICJ and its role and its jurisdiction in settling this matter. It's before the ICJ now. Uh, and they're claiming sovereignty over the Essequibo region since the referendum. Can we, how do you see this matter with the president on one side refusing to acknowledge what the court will present, will rule on eventually? What room is there, in your experience of these matters, what room is there to come to a satisfactory settlement in this matter without any sort of violent confrontation?
Well, I can only speak for Guyana. I'm not able to tell you what Venezuela's intentions are. Indeed, the entire claim itself seems absurd, given that Venezuela has never had a presence in this place that is called Essequibo. It has never had such a presence. It has no footprint there. And let me say to you, as regards Venezuela's claim that it doesn't acknowledge the role of the ICJ, this is completely lawless in the sense that, as a member of the UN, Venezuela, like other UN members, has undertaken to comply with the decisions of the court where they apply to Venezuela. It isn't a question of not respecting the role of the court. By joining the UN, and Venezuela joined the UN relatively early compared to Guyana because it was already independent when the UN was established, it is obliged to comply with the rulings of the ICJ, and that is why it is there. That is why it has been party to a discussion. That is why in 2015, the Secretary General summoned President Maduro as well as President Granger, had discussions on this matter, made it clear that this matter of whether an arbitration decision was valid or not could not be made by one of the parties that was itself a beneficiary of the decision of the court. So the Secretary General made that plain to President Maduro. President Maduro agreed to a process which in 2016 the Secretary General wrote President Maduro one. President Maduro then assigned Minister Ariaza to work with Doug Newlander and myself and our teams on the question of this controversy. And when at the end of that nearly 2 year period, the two sides couldn't agree, Doug Newlander, who actually we had no connection with Doug Newlander, he'd been working with Venezuela and Colombia on the problem that Venezuela and Colombia had over the activities of paramilitaries on their borders. He concluded in a report to the Secretaries General, because at that time you had a transition from Ban Ki-moon to the Honorable Mr. Gutierrez, and the two Secretaries General together with Doug Newlander, agreed that the parties were going further apart rather than getting narrower. And it is that reason why the matter was sent to the ICJ. You cannot require two parties to sit down and agree if they don't agree. In other words, Mr. Maduro and the Guyanese, Mr. Maduro's teams and the Guyanese have been discussing this matter since 1966. It is not dispute to 1899, it's 1966 because they first raised the issue in 62. And since that time, dialogue has not led to the matter being resolved. Why on earth, after nearly 60 years of inability to agree, would you suggest, unless you are prepared to give up your demands, why would you assume that just more talking would solve the problem? As a matter of fact, what is clear is that Mr. Maduro understands that more talking will not solve the problem. That is exactly why you see troops being mustered and threats being made against Guyana by Venezuela. So
But
the prospects of violence, I can't answer. That lies in the hands of Mr. Maduro and his Venezuelan generals. The Guyana is not going to initiate any hostilities or military action because it doesn't have the military capacity to do so, and it would be most foolish. So that question is best answered by Mr. Maduro.
now, Venezuela's claim over the Essequibo region is based on a letter, a posthumous document by a junior member of the arbitration team of 1899, I believe, 1897, 1899, I believe. Uh, so far, have they presented any other evidence to support their claim of the
Callistra,
region?
first of all, let me say to you that Severo Maleprevost, who was the junior member of the Venezuelan team and a Mexican, by the way, and I say that not with any prejudice, but just to say that he was actually working for Venezuela like he was working for many others. I don't know that any claim is based upon Severo Maleprevost's document. First of all, it is said, and it is said by the man who worked in his office, that he dictated a letter and this man wrote up the letter and then published it. Okay? We don't know, and there's no proof, actually, that any such letter was dictated by Mali Prevost. And if you dictate like I do, having dictated something, you often need to look at it and sign it. We don't know that that happened. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a considerable amount of doubt about that part. In 51, Mr. Child, who was an expert in these matters, wrote a critique and a rejection of Male Prevost's allegations. They are only allegations. Venezuela had from 1962 to 66 to present the allegations to a mixed commission of experts drawn from Venezuela and from Guyana. It did not do so. In 2016 to 2018, when the Secretary General and Mr. Doug Newlander were examining the issues, Venezuela had an opportunity to submit, if it had that information or any additional information, formally to the enhanced mediation process. It did not do so. I have not seen any formal submission of Venezuela on this matter, and the so-called evidence has not been the subject of any forensic analysis as would normally be carried out by a court. So it is an allegation, and let me say that the critique of the note that was published from Malay Prevost's office pointed out that several of the key elements pertaining to the allegation were false. They were either just lapses of memory or events completely falsified. And Mr. Malay Prevost's uh, experience during the arbitration proceedings caused him to be subject to criticism by the lawyers for selective presentation of information. I can tell you that. If you look at the records, you will see that. And so it is not as though we're looking at someone whose record was unblemished in any sense. In fact, the man he's accusing of fashioning or forcing the others to agree. And the decision of 1899 was unanimous, you know. You have to be very special to get people to agree to something unanimously when all of them recognize that it is wrong. So that is what he's suggesting, that uh, the chairman, Mr. De Martins, who was a Russian, in fact, he was an Estonian, working under the framework of the Russian crown, had somehow behaved improperly by getting the members of the panel to decide unanimously on this matter. But the this chairman, D. Martins, was nominated twice for the Nobel Prize. Twice for the Nobel Prize for his work on arbitration, not on arbitration in Guyana, not on arbitration on behalf of Russia, but arbitration in Europe. He was the expert on such matters. And we have no reason, and we have seen no reason, no evidence produced by Venezuela to have us believe that there was anything improper about the proceedings of the arbitration panel. And indeed, no such evidence has been produced by Venezuela. Venezuela merely has made an assertion. You say it's based on this letter, but the letter, as I said, was never produced to the fora where it could have been examined. And therefore, you have a situation in which somebody has said some things which others regard as gossip. That is all it is, emanating from one place. And you then overturn an international treaty that you have honored for 63 years. That is the situation as regards the so-called evidence. It has never been the subject of any court examination, and we know why Venezuela would not be willing to have it subject to such examination, because it is largely specious.
This is The Narrative. I'm on with Carl Greenidge. He's the advisor on borders for Guyana. We're discussing the Venezuela-Guyana territorial controversy. More when we come back.